Oh my goodness, no. Get off the soundboard. That's how we're going to start this episode. We're starting this episode with a cat who's trying to walk across the soundboard. Say hi, Louise. Nope, not squeaking today. Bye, Louise. So, welcome to another... I realized I didn't change the name. So let me update the text here. I'll go through what we're doing. Marvel's Defenders. Luke Cage. Character creation. And the description is creating in Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. The 4 main characters from Marvel's Defenders series, starting with Luke Cage. So, like I said last time, we're doing this a little bit differently than I've done some of the previous versions of character creation. Normally I've been doing it live, going through all the different levels, getting it up to level 20 for Aragorn or Gimli from Lord of the Rings. I've also done Gambit as well from Marvel. But this time I decided it was going to be easier and faster, since you don't really need to see the whole process at this point, to kind of go through like how I decided to create Luke Cage, and just kind of go through like the different levels and the different abilities, why I think they make sense. Sorry, something weird's going on. Let me reload one thing quick. See, you're gonna allow me to drag it down now. Let's stick it there. I just want to get the chat up higher. I don't know that we'll have anybody join, but wanted to get that going. So, with Luke Cage, I went 14 levels of Barbarian and 6 levels of Monk. The reason I went with Barbarian is that gives me more damage, but the big thing is I can go Bear Totem Barbarian to... Oh, I realized something. He would have 60 feet of movement. I'm going to leave it at 50. Could be a little bit higher, but leaving it at that. And unarmored defense 10 plus con. I think that's at 17 now. Trying to get everything lined up correctly for him. So the reason for going Monk, which I actually did at the very end, is because with Monk you get that unarmed strike ability. You get the martial arts, which allows him to do 1d6 plus 4 damage on oh yeah, forgot to check one other thing quick here. So you're gonna join me with this, because the Barbarian and Monk both get an extra attack, but I believe besides the fighter, nobody gets more than a single extra attack, which means even though I hit levels for both of them to get extra attacks, you only still get one. That's one of the weird things of multi-classing. So if you're not familiar with the backstory of Luke Cage, this is kind of how it's worked for him growing up, and why I went with the criminal pickpocket background. He grew up, or as he was growing up, he was a member of a gang, and was friends with, I believe, working from memory, the member of a rival gang. Like, they were good friends growing up. When that member of the rival gang, since Luke was always just kind of like petty crime in the gang, so when Luke ended up, or when his buddy ended up starting to do more dangerous things in the gang, his buddy's girlfriend dumped him and found solace in, I believe his name at that point in time was Carl Lucas, or Carl Luca. Let's hop right here. Carl Lucas. And his buddy obviously didn't really take all that well to that, and ended up framing him for basically drug running with heroin. And so he went to prison, and while he was in prison, he got into a lot of fights, ended up being transferred into a higher security prison where he ran afoul of a corrupt guard, basically, who was doing some super soldier type experiments, and Luke Cage volunteered for that. However, with that, he then, like, the person shouldn't have really been doing them and wasn't really capable of doing them well. And so Luke ended up with strength and durability that are off the charts. And so that's kind of what I went for with the build, why I picked the criminal background. You can see that strength and con are the two highest. I could have, I think, gotten them... No, I couldn't have gotten them higher. I could have had a 19 strength, but that would still be a +4 modifier. Instead, I used that to get the wisdom up to 14. Because Luke Cage it's not that he's stupid, it's that he didn't finish a high school education. When he was running with the gangs, and I think he might have even gone to jail, well, he would have still been in high school. So he doesn't have that high level of education. However, he has spent a lot of time on the streets. In the Marvel world, he has been a bar owner, I believe. And so he knows his way around a lot of things. It's just not necessarily book smarts. It's a lot of that street smarts. When you live in Hell's Kitchen, you kind of have to have those or you're going to end up dead. So that's what I went with there. And now, let's just talk a little bit about the personality traits that I gave him, as well as the ideals, bonds, and flaws. Never tell him the odds, and he's slow to trust. Both of those, the never tell me the odds are, he thinks that he's fairly unbeatable, and especially prior to his marrying Jessica Jones and having a kid with her. So he's also very loyal to his friends and ideals, but slow to trust. So once you have his trust, he's going to have your back. But with his family, which is his bond, like, that's what he really is tied into so well, he's a little bit more apt to, if there's a chance of danger, chance of something going on with Jessica Jones and their kid, he's much more apt to leave, like, Iron Fist and Daredevil high and dry to go check on him. So, a few other things here. The monk part is pretty easy to see why I did it. The primary reason why I went monk here is the martial arts, with the fact that it helps him be able to attack unarmed. As you can see, he has +10 to hit, +4 damage on a d6. If I had gone higher on monk, I could have gotten that die higher. I could have gotten it up to a d8. I believe maybe even a D10, but I would have lost out on the rage ability, which gives him an extra 3 damage when raging anyways, so it's a +7 to damage, which in D&D math is slightly worse than rolling a D6. Well, in actual math, but for how you think of it in Dungeons and Dragons, when you're going to roll a D6, you're going to average 3.5. So basically adds an additional D6 worth of damage to his attacks. So we have the martial arts. We have the slow fall ability. In normal Dungeons and Dragons and in our Dungeons and Dragons game, I kind of use it as Nim's ability to kind of leap off walls. The best example I can think of is from the Battle of the Five Armies Hobbit movie, where there were where Legolas was jumping, or was it the other elf? I can't remember which elf it was. That was jumping off the stones that were falling to go up higher. Well, this is kind of the opposite. You're like jumping off of the stones that are falling, so that when you make it to the ground, you're really not falling all that fast. You're just kind of land. However, for Luke Cage, that's not really particularly how it works. You would flavor it that it works from the fact that he's so durable that when he falls, he just doesn't take as much damage as other people. Which is fun, interesting to see. And it works out well. And so I'm going to go back to here a little bit. I filled in a little information for the allies and organizations, basically just saying he's a member of the Defenders, who are out of Hell's Kitchen in New York City. He fights alongside Daredevil, Iron Fist, and his wife, Jessica Jones. This is the backstory for him, but the reason I came back here is this key point idea. So key points are really going to make much more of a difference for the Iron Fist, but with how they are and the fact that sure, they're magical, but it basically just means that he avoids resistances that people might have. I realize you can't see them all, so I'm moving down lower. Flurry of blows. I really want to be Fury of blows, but it's flurry of blows. He gets to make 2 extra unarmed attacks instead of 1. Patient defense allows him to take a dodge action. Probably not going to use it all that much. Step of the Wind, or as it's actually called, Step of the Wind, is he can use a bonus action to dash or to disengage. Also, probably not one you're going to use all that much if you're trying to play Luke Cage. Stunning Strike, on the other hand, I think makes a whole lot more sense. He's just so freaking strong that he can punch you, and if you fail your con saving throw, you're just kind of knocked for a loop for a round. There's the Deflect Missiles, which, again, I probably would say isn't something that you would use all that much while playing Luke Cage. I think if you wanted to flavor it as, especially at higher levels, since he is built as a 20th level character right now, maybe the all ranged attacks against him are going to do more than 1d10 plus 8 damage. So it's just his durability again, so he can soak up damage. Then I went Path of the Open Hand for the monk tradition, and with that Path of the Open Hand, this is the one that kind of has a little bit more damage control, like board control, but doesn't have really any mystical features, especially when you only go 6 levels. So when you hit with a flurry of blows, you can force the target that you've hit to make a dex saving throw or be knocked prone, or to make a strength saving throw, or to be pushed back 15 feet, or can't take a reaction until your next turn. So all of these are kind of end of your next turn. kind of they all make sense for someone who's exceedingly strong. And the final ability that we got when just at 6th level of Monk is this Wholeness of Body, where once per long rest, you can take an action to gain back 18 hit points, as it says. Again, I think this would just be flavored in as it's extra durability for him. Now, he's not really going to need those 18 hit points ever, and once we get to the Barbarian side of things, it's going to become really obvious why that's the case. So let me flip back to this page. And I will point out that I did actually go Barbarian first, and there's a reason for that. If you look at the saving throws, which are on towards the top left corner of the screen right now, you can see that it's Strength and Constitution. Those are the two saving throws he should definitely be best at. So that's why I went Barbarian first. It also allowed us to get Athletics as a proficiency. Let me zoom in one more. That looks a bit blurry. Which is really nice. That's a plus 10 by the time you're done. There's Deception and Stealth, both come from the Thief background. I don't know that they fit as well as some of them, the rest of them would. I think Survival would make a lot of sense for him, and probably Intimidation. But I didn't want to really mess with... I actually am going to mess with the background stats, because I think that it makes more sense for Survival, which is also a plus 8. So that swaps out nicely with the Stealth. Same numbers. Because he's very familiar with surviving on the streets. And Intimidation, which is Charisma based, which is a plus 6, which actually swaps out really nicely with the Deception, which is also Charisma based, which is a plus 6 as well. So we've kept the numbers very similar to what they were before, so we're not throwing up his power too high or anything like that. But let's talk a little bit about some of the things we get with Barbarian. We also, well, first off, we get 14 D12 hit points or hit die, and that helped us really get a high number of hit points. As you can see, we're at 207 hit points, which is going to become even more impressive, and when I explain something later and explain why we don't really ever, we're not ever going to need to use those monk hit points, most likely. With a Barbarian, you have an unarmored defense. That unarmored defense is based off of Con, I think Con, Wiz, and 10, a base of 10. It might be Con, Dex, and 10. Either way, it adds up to 7, so 17 total, which is a pretty solid armor class. So here we have probably the big things to pay attention to for him. So there's Rage, which is always interesting. Advantage on strength checks and saving throws, which we really don't need. We already have a plus 10 in that, but it's kind of cool, especially if you want to flavor like him attacking a wall or something to blast through it. Advantage on a strength check where you're getting plus 4, not bad. Gonna, I think, give you an average of something about like 20. It's gonna be really close to 20. Plus 3 damage while raging, which we talked about a little bit already. It allows his fists to be much more effective without going for a higher level of monk. And finally, resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage. And with that, that starts to get into that durability thing. Luke Cage is supposed to be almost impossible to take down. I mean, think about Steve Rogers as well. When they're in their prime, they bounce back. Reckless attack works pretty well. It's nothing that's all that unique. It's just simply that he can be reckless when he attacks, as reckless attack would imply. And then you end up with someone who, like, other people can hit him back easier, but because of that resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage, and especially once we get to the bear totem, every type of damage except psychic, which makes a lot of sense, it's pretty impressive. Yeah, it's entertaining. Well worked. So he has danger sense, advantage on dex saving throws against effects he can see. He has feral instincts, advantage on initiative rolls, which means you're going to get into combat fast. But the real reason, like the biggest reason I went barbarian, is for the bear totem. As I said, resistance to all damage except for psychic damage. So basically, the vast majority of other damage you're going to take is going to have a physical component to it, which with his durability makes a lot of sense. Carrying capacity is doubled. Makes sense. He's very strong. Advantage on strength checks to push, pull, lift, and break objects. Makes a lot of sense as well. And creatures within 5 feet of you in combat have disadvantage on attack rolls not against you. Now this one's a little bit odder, but I would flavor it simply as, I mean, he's 6'6", 425 pounds, and if we look at this picture of him again, there's not fat. This guy is just strong as can be. So people are going to be worried about him, and he's just going to be a concern to everyone out there. So I think it makes a lot of sense. This is what I consider probably, without tweaking anything, without giving him any extra stat bumps or any extra feats, anything like that, I think this is very close to what Luke Cage would be in a Dungeons and Dragons build. Now you'll see that I didn't fill in a bunch of stuff like equipment, other proficiencies, stuff like that, is simply because I'm trying to build Luke Cage here, and I'm not trying to necessarily tell you exactly what he needs to have to be set in either Hell's Kitchen in New York City, or if you wanted to play him in an actual D&D game, then like D&D setting, high fantasy, it's pretty easy to just drop this straight in. You'd want to drop out the information that I have about New York City, Hell's Kitchen, unless you have a medieval city called New York City with Hell's Kitchen, and you can roll with that. I mean, all of it actually kind of makes sense to be able to leave, even description wise, but I didn't want to give gear or proficiencies that didn't make sense for the world that you were playing in. I think I'm going to start uploading some of these to Google Drive and sharing those files separately as I post them to the Nerdologists website. So look for that to come, probably not until Friday. Friday is generally when I do video posts as well as my blog post at that point in time. So with that, it's a little bit shorter than sometimes, but that's my breakdown for Luke Cage. I think I am going to try and build Do I want the Iron Fist or Jessica Jones next? Probably Jessica Jones next, and we'll just see how that goes. She's a little bit different type of character than some of them, and has a weird, dark past that we'll get into then. So with that, check out nerdologists.com, and if you have comments on this, please tweet them to us at nerdologistcast, or tweet them to me at nerdologistcast, or at the Scando. Scando is my personal Twitter handle. And finally, if you want to find us on Facebook, you can find us there by searching for Nerdologists. So with that, have a great rest of your day, and I will see you next time, or will shortly see you next time, as I figure out how to stop the stream. But with that,